So I've officially been vegan for 8 years now, and over the years I've continued to find more and more meals that I absolutely love cooking and of course love eating. Lately I've been craving heartier meals that are both easy and pleasurable to cook, and today I'm excited to share with you 5 vegan dinners that I've been eating on repeat, made possible by my friends at Squarespace. I figured the first recipe I shared with you should be my current favorite, which is this delicious peanut butter, tofu and vegetable stir fry. This is one of those recipes where you can choose what veggies you'd prefer to have in it, but personally I've been loving having red capsicum, carrot, broccoli or broccolini and green peas. Once I've cut all of these up as I desire, I turn my attention to the tofu. I have been really enjoying slicing my tofu very thin and very flat to allow it to get a little bit more crispy as I fry it up. Once I've cut it, I add it into my frying pan with some olive oil and I fry it up for a few minutes before adding in all of my veggies and continuing to fry that for another 10 minutes. Whilst they're frying, it's time to make the peanut butter sauce, and I start by adding some peanut butter into a large bowl. You can use smooth or crunchy depending on what you prefer. And then I also add in some soy sauce, maple syrup, lime, coconut milk from the can, and some water. I use a whisk to mix it all together and ensure it's nice and smooth and has a really pourable texture. We need it to be pourable because then we're going to pour it in with our stir-fried veggies and tofu. And once I have added it in, I reduce the heat to low and I continue frying everything up, stirring it for a few minutes before removing it from the heat. Personally, I love serving this with some super fresh and fluffy rice, as well as some sesame seeds and some roasted cashews on top for a little bit of extra crunch. Honestly, I think if you try anything from today's video, it needs to be this sweet potato and lentil pie. To make it, I start by removing the skin from a sweet potato and cutting it into chunks. Then I transfer this into a pot of boiling water over the stove and I leave it to boil. Now, whilst it's boiling, I'm going to start making the lentil mixture. So I first start by dicing half of a brown onion, and then I also finely chop a couple of cloves of garlic. As the sweet potato continues to boil away, I also place a large frying pan over medium to high heat on the stove, and I add in a little bit of olive oil. Then I start frying up the onion and garlic in the oil before adding in some tomato paste, and I fry this up for a few minutes before adding in some brown lentils as well as green peas. I keep frying this up for about 10 minutes. I also add in some vegan beef stock powder, some water, and some salt and pepper to taste as I go. Once the water is all absorbed, the mixture is done and we can remove this from the heat. I then drain the sweet potatoes and I place them into a bowl with some vegan butter, some soy milk, nutritional yeast, and veggie stock powder, and I mix and I mash this all together with a fork until I've made a super delicious mashed sweet potato. Into a baking tin, I place 2 pieces of puff pastry, one on top of the other, pressing them against the bottom of the tin and the sides. Then I add the lentil mixture followed by the mashed sweet potato, and then fold over the edges of the puff pastry and place it in the oven to bake for about 25 minutes. Once it's done, I leave it to cool for a few minutes before placing it onto a cutting board and slicing it into 4 very beautiful pieces. I really love making this in advance as well and putting the extra pieces in the fridge or the freezer to reheat and to enjoy throughout the week. If you're trying to go vegan or introduce more plants into your diet, then there are a bunch of vegan recipes over on my website I think you are going to love. My website is amandadux.com, and I created my website using Squarespace, who have very kindly sponsored today's video. Not only is it a great place to be able to share a blog like I do, it's also a great place to be able to send out email campaigns and also to be able to set up your own online store. Personally, I set up an online store for my ebook and I found it so ridiculously easy to do. Whether you're just starting out or you're looking to manage a growing brand, Squarespace is a great all-in-one platform to create an easy yet professional website. You can head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, you can go to squarespace.com/AmandaDux and use my code AmandaDux, which gets you 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. Now, you've probably seen me make a variation of this teriyaki tempeh dish before, but let this be a reminder that you definitely need to give it a try. I start by preparing my veggies, which once again, you can choose which ones you'd like to use, but personally, I love making this with green veggies. I always use leek, which I ensure to slice finely and give a really good wash, as well as broccolini and some big chunks of spring onion. I also love using this chickpea tempeh, but you can use a soy tempeh or a tofu if you would prefer it. I like to cut it into long pieces, but once again, you can cut it however you would like to. And then into a bowl, I place some teriyaki sauce, soy sauce, olive oil, maple syrup, onion powder, and garlic powder, and I mix them until they're well combined. This is going to be both like our marinade for the tempeh as well as the broccolini, and then it's also going to be the sauce that we add to the rest of the veggies as they're cooking. So I marinate the tempeh in the sauce before placing it into a large frying pan over medium to high heat. I then fry this up for a few minutes whilst I marinate the broccolini in the same sauce. Then I add the broccolini to the frying pan and I continue frying it for a further few minutes before adding in the spring onion, the leek, and the rest of the sauce. And I continue frying this for another few minutes until the leek and the spring onion start to like slightly brown. Once again, for serving, I love serving this simply with just some rice and some sesame seeds on top, but honestly, it is also just super delicious by itself if that's more your kind of thing. It's actually kind of crazy to think about how many years I spent thinking that I didn't like tofu, because now I eat it in at least a few meals every single week. These crispy tofu tacos are super delicious and super easy to make, and I start making these by prepping the tofu and cutting it into long pieces. Then I place these pieces into a bowl and I coat them in some olive oil and then add in some garlic powder, onion powder, veggie stock powder, nutritional yeast, and some panko breadcrumbs. I toss the tofu well to combine and coat it all very well. And then when it comes to cooking, you can do these a few different ways. So you can cook these in a frying pan over the heat, in an air fryer, or in the oven. Today I cooked them in a frying pan, so I just add a little extra olive oil into a pan over medium heat, and then I add the tofu and make sure to flip it every few minutes and cook them until each piece is nice and crispy on each side. With the rest of the taco fillings, you can kind of decide what you'd like to add and what you enjoy the most. Personally, I always love having some avocado, which I just mashed up with a little bit of salt and pepper to taste. I then decided that I would have 3 tacos for dinner, so I topped these taco shells with some avocado, followed by some fresh greens, the crispy tofu pieces, some pickled onion, because by the way, I'm suddenly obsessed with pickled onions and I'm going through a real phase right now. And then I also added on some sprouts as well as some fresh lime to squeeze over the top. These are a super fresh and delicious dinner, but they're also really hearty. I hope that you absolutely love them. Not to be dramatic, but I think that I have perfected the art of the simple, delicious, creamy vegan pasta, and it only takes minimal ingredients as well as minimal time. So I love topping it with some roasted cherry tomatoes. So to start this recipe, that's what we're preparing. I just placed some cherry tomatoes into a bowl. I drizzle them with some olive oil, as well as some salt, pepper, garlic powder, and onion powder. And then I toss them to coat them before transferring them onto a baking tray and into the oven whilst I prep the rest of my pasta. So I've put the water on the boil, and then I place some vegan butter into a large frying pan. Then I add some spaghetti to the boiling water before adding some soy milk, nutritional yeast, and veggie stock powder into the frying pan and mixing it all together with that melted vegan butter. I kept mixing this whilst my pasta boiled, and then suddenly it got very dark in our apartment, just like all at once. But anyway, I added in some frozen peas with the spaghetti to soften them really quickly. I also added some pasta water into the creamy sauce and continued mixing it before draining the spaghetti and the peas and adding them in with the creamy sauce. I also then added in a large handful of fresh spinach and mixed this all together over the heat for a few minutes. And this pasta is now ready to serve. It makes about 2 to 4 serves depending on how much pasta you like, and I like serving this in a bowl with some of the roasted cherry tomatoes on top. Super, super delicious. And that brings us to the end of 5 delicious vegan dinners that I am obsessed with at the moment. I hope you found something new to try in today's video. As always, thanks so much for being here, for supporting me and my YouTube channel. I look forward to seeing you next week with another video. Have a good one. Bye.